I'd like to tell you a little story about the first time I attempted a jazz solo on the piano. I was barely 13 years old. I was in my first jazz piano lesson, and my teacher had just gone over basic chords and what each one meant. We were looking at a simple progression, a 12-bar blues, which essentially only has 3 main chords. The 1, or root, the 4, and the 5. Easy, right? Then my teacher turned to me and said, "Do you want to play in the key of F or B flat?" Now, keep in mind this was my first time ever reading chords. F was an easier and simpler key for the piano that would probably give me a good shot at success. So, wanting to show off, I picked B flat. My teacher nodded. Suddenly, she placed a chord chart in front of me, saying, "Now solo over these changes." And before I could take back my bravado and confidence, before I could even get out a protest, she started counting. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I was forced to play. And while I was struggling, she was playing these cool riffs, this walking bass, and these chords low down with me on the piano. It sounded something like this. And meanwhile, I was struggling. Because you see, all I'd ever played before was pre-memorized music, most of it classical. This is where I was coming from. So at the time, soloing felt weird and terribly out of place. It felt like I was sinking into a pit of humiliation as I struggled to answer the question, what do I play? But what I didn't realize at the time was that something very special was happening. I was improvising. Because when we improvise, though it may be raw and imperfect, I'm expressing myself in the most true and pure way possible. Words truly can't describe the thrill of improvising. It's a flow of my ideas, my thoughts, and my emotions. I'm constantly composing and playing and composing and playing because when I improvise, I don't have to play what Mozart thought of or what Beethoven wrote. I have the freedom to express myself. Today, I'd like to shed some light on improvisation, not only in the context of music, but in the broadest context of all, our lives. I have a bold proposition to make. We are all improvisers. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that we're improvising at every moment. When I say that we are all improvisers, I mean that there are times in our lives where we're forced to act on the spot. It's not every time. Take this as an example. Imagine you have an upcoming surgery. On the day of, you walk into the operation room, and right before the anesthesia takes you under, you hear the doctor telling his assistant, "Let's just improvise this one and see how it goes." No, when I say we are all improvisers, I'm talking about those times when we have to act on the spot. For students, maybe it's that unexpected test question. For business people, maybe it's pitching an idea to an investor who you just happen to run into. For athletes, maybe it's finding yourself in a position where the play has broken down and you have to step up and do something. Or for those of you who have siblings, maybe it's something as simple as an impromptu wedding toast at your brother or sister's wedding reception. It's during these times that our true selves shine through. It's like we have to start paying attention, not just going through the motions. We act, react. We live in the moment, in the now. This is improvisation. Improv is a vital skill for all of us to learn. I'm going to draw from my experiences in musical improv to explain how we all, within our lives, can become better improvisers. There are 3 keys to improvisation: readiness, confidence, and direction. We'll start with readiness. Readiness is the preparation that goes on far before I even step onto the stage. Before I even start my solo, I have to be ready, which is counterintuitive because it seems like the complete opposite of improvisation. Let me ask a question. Why is it that jazz greats such as Herbie Hancock or Miles Davis can pull off a killer solo where a random novice musician likely can't? As backwards as it seems, it's because they are ready to improvise. Being ready is one of the most important keys. Let me tell you a story. When I was younger, I was notorious for not practicing enough for my classical piano lesson. Part of the reason was that I had a whole bag of tricks to get away with it. Case in point. Let's say I forgot to practice my Mozart that week. Right before I went into my piano teacher's house, I'd pull my Mozart book out of my bag, hide it somewhere in my car, and run inside. I'm sorry, I forgot my Mozart. I guess we'll have to do it next week. So when I started to learn jazz, I was psyched because I thought I wouldn't have to pretend anymore. After all, if I'm making up what I play on the spot, then I don't have to practice, right? Wrong. What I learned was that improv is hard. Very, very hard. I could barely practice my classical piece and still make it sound halfway decent, at least to the untrained ear. But I would practice my improv for hours and hours, and even a first grader could tell how lousy I sounded. So as backwards as it seems, when we improvise, we have to prepare even more than we normally would. And the good news is, when we prepare to improvise, we're not only improving that specific activity, but we're improving ourselves because we are the ones creating. And what I've learned is that the largest changes in our life can come from the smallest, most innocuous, fleeting opportunities. I'll use athletes as an example one more time. Let's say one practice you decide to stay afterwards and work a little bit extra on your shot. Come game day, maybe you get the chance to step up with the ball or the puck, the play is broken down, you make a play, you shoot, you score. Maybe you save the game even. And who knows? Maybe winning that one game could save your season, which could qualify you for a tournament, and you could progress in that tournament, and who knows what could happen. The courses of many lives could be drastically changed for the better, just because you took a little bit of extra time to get ready, to practice, to prepare. And it could make all the difference. So we're ready for our solo. We step on stage, and the next key is confidence, because if we're not confident, the whole solo breaks down. When I improvise, I'm not just playing notes. I'm expressing myself. I'm taking the audience on a journey. And if even I don't believe in myself, how will the audience connect with what I'm trying to say through the music? I'm going to give 2 sample solos for you. One will be without confidence, and one will be with confidence. See if you can hear the difference. Solo 1. Solo 2. As you can see, confidence is what set the second solo apart from the first. When I say confidence, I don't mean thinking you're better than anyone else. I don't mean thinking that you will succeed when realistically you have a slim chance. When I say confidence, I mean 2 words and 2 words only: buying in. Because when I buy in, my entire mindset changes when I'm soloing. It changes from, how will I get through the end of this? How will I not play wrong notes? To, how can I make my solo brilliant and powerful? There was a time last year when my jazz teacher was coaching a group of musicians, a bassist, a drummer, a saxophonist, and I. And he had just given us that same speech about being passionate, about being confident, about buying into your solo and not holding back. And he turned to me and he said, "Joshua, your turn, you try." So I decided, why not? I went for it. I bought in. I didn't worry about playing wrong notes, didn't think about any of that. I just decided to test my limits. And how was my solo? Well, afterwards, everyone came up and congratulated me. My teacher in particular was gushing about all the advanced things I had put into my solo. Lydian dominance and flat 11s and chord substitutions and tritones, all these things I had never even heard of at the time. Somehow, had I found them within me? Well, how really was my solo? There's a saying we have: there are no wrong notes in jazz. And I think on that day, I made history because I proved that saying wrong. That's how bad my solo was. But honestly, it's the confidence I had that really made my solo shine. A writer named Irma Bombeck once said, "Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you never get anywhere." Confidence sweeps away our worries. Personally, I know the feeling all too well of playing half-heartedly, of holding something back, of trying to be nervous and play at the same time. And the reason is that it's hard to buy in. We're uncomfortable just going for it because we don't know what will happen. And what I've learned is that by buying in and not looking back, that is the only way I can push myself further along the path to improvement. Okay, so we're prepared for our solo. We've practiced for hours and hours, and we're confident. We get on the stage, and the last piece is direction. Direction is deliberate and defined movement. It's what gives our solo shape. It's what gives it form. I'm going to play 2 more sample solos for you. This is solo 1. We call this background music. And this is solo 2. As you can see, the second solo had direction. It had shape. It had movement. The first solo may have sounded okay, but it was superfluous. It did not have shape. So, how can we apply this to the greater scope of improv within our everyday lives? It's easy to see how direction applies to a musical solo. Well, this is what I have to say. One of my favorite quotes is from Lewis Carroll, from Alice in Wonderland. Alice has just fallen down her rabbit hole, and she runs into the Cheshire Cat. And the cat says to her, "Alice, where are you going?" And Alice says, "Well, which way should I go?" And the cat says, "Well, that depends on where you are going." And Alice says, "I don't know." And then the cat says, "Then it doesn't matter which way you go." The way that we can apply the key of direction to improv within our lives is by thinking about the broader direction we have. I've always found it interesting, the types of questions I get asked about the direction I want to take my life in. Pretty much ever since I learned to speak, I've been asked what I want to do when I grow up. I've been asked where I see myself in 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, but no less than 5 years, because what could we possibly do in less than 5 years? My point in saying this is that in order to achieve a long-term life direction, we first have to assemble smaller, short-term directions. It will look something like this. Think, reflect for a second. Are the activities you place in your lives driving you towards this long-term direction? Or are they just taking up space? Are they just background music? It's easy to say where we want to be in a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 or 10 if we're particularly ambitious. But what most people miss is that in order to get there, we first have to assemble these smaller directions. So the next time you're giving an impromptu speech, the next time you're struggling with a difficult test question, the next time you're giving that pitch to an investor, think, where are you headed? What is the direction that you are aiming for? So there you have it. Readiness, confidence, and direction. 3 keys to improvisation, and 3 traits I believe are underrepresented in our everyday lives. If there's one thing to take away from this talk, it's this. Our life bears a striking resemblance to a big solo. The moments continually passing by as we decide what to do, we act, we create, we think, we choose. Our life solo is always rolling. It's up to us to decide what we are going to play. Now I'm going to play a little something for you on the piano, give you a taste of some musical improv. This is All the Things You Are. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.